Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha Television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. In a historic referendum, the United Kingdom votes to leave the European Union by a 52% to 48% margin. London, Scotland and Northern Ireland vote strongly to stay in the EU, but the rest of England votes in favour of Brexit. India's NSG hopes scuttled for now. China continues to block country's bid, but India claims support of 38 out of the 48 members of the group. Tension in the South China Sea escalates after North Korea conducts fresh ballistic missile launches. UN joins the US, Japan and South Korea in condemning the act. Kim says missiles can reach US in the Pacific. And the United States Supreme Court delivers a 4-4 verdict on plan to prevent 4 million illegal immigrants from being deported. Split comes as a blow to President Barack Obama's 2014 executive action. Our top focus on the program this week, the United Kingdom's historic Brexit vote to leave the European Union triggered the resignation of Prime Minister David Cameron and wreaked havoc on global markets. There was a mixture of jubilation and tearful disbelief in the UK as people awoke to the final result from Thursday's extremely close vote, which deeply divided the nation. The result plunged Europe into uncertainty with calls for further referendums from emboldened far-right groups who see it as a boost for their anti-EU, anti-immigration policies. Here's a detailed report.
It's a victory for ordinary people, decent people.
I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
In a historic referendum, UK voted to leave the European Union. The official results showed the Leave campaign winning with 51.5% of the vote. The referendum saw more than 30 million people voting with a turnout of about 72%, the highest at a UK-wide vote since 1992. Following the results, British Prime Minister David Cameron said he will step down. Cameron had been strongly advocating for the Remain campaign and had urged his countrymen to stay in the European Union.
But the British people have made a very clear decision to take a different path. And as such, I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction. I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination. This is not a decision I've taken lightly, but I do believe it's in the national interest to have a period of stability and then the new leadership required.
However, there was celebration in the Leave camp. UK Independence Party leader Nigel Farage, who has campaigned for the past 20 years for Britain to leave the EU, hailed the result as the UK's Independence Day.
It's a victory for ordinary people, decent people. It's a victory against the big merchant banks, against the big businesses and against big politics. We now need a Brexit government, a government that gets on with the job, a government that begins the renegotiation of our trade relationship.
Britain, which joined the then European Economic Community in 1973, has always been an ambivalent member, but after Thursday's referendum, it has become the first country to leave the EU since its formation. However, the Leave vote does not immediately mean Britain ceases to be a member of the 28-nation bloc, as the process could take a minimum of 2 years. The referendum result has shocked many world powers which had been hoping for Britain to stay with the EU. The former imperial power has now set itself on an uncertain path as it also seeks a new leader. Ex-London mayor and a leading Brexit campaigner Boris Johnson is the favourite to replace David Cameron as Prime Minister. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, the world reacted to Brexit with caution. While the European Union itself said it was saddened by the UK's exit, most European countries and even those outside were worried about how this would affect them.
Hiding the fact that we wanted a different outcome of yesterday's referendum. I am fully aware of how serious or even dramatic this moment is politically, and there is no way of predicting all the political consequences of this event, especially for the UK. It is a historic moment, but for sure not a moment for hysterical reactions.
The line of the European Parliament is quite clear. We are very sad about the decision of the voters in the United Kingdom, but it is a sovereign expression of the will of British voters to leave the European Union. This is a difficult moment for both sides, for the European Union as for the United Kingdom. We have now, from a legal and from a procedural point of view, to assess what are the necessary next steps.
The impact on Australia immediately, directly from a legal point of view, will be very limited because it will take some years for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union to negotiate an exit. However, we've seen already large falls on stock markets, and there will be a degree of uncertainty for some time.
Well, joining me for a chat this week to talk about this is former diplomat, Ambassador Mira Shankar. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining me on the program. Let's talk about Brexit now and what the consequences really of it are going to be and who stands to be impacted the most.
Well, clearly, I think Britain, the United Kingdom and the European Union stand to be impacted the most. You have now a deeply divided country in the United Kingdom, 48% to 51.5%, and emotions have been aroused during the course of the campaign. What impact this will have on the United Kingdom economically and perhaps also politically remains to be seen, but you've already seen the pound plunge by more than 10% in a day vis-a-vis the dollar. Stock markets all over the world are roiled. And then with Scotland, Northern Ireland and London voting strongly to stay, what is this going to mean for the future unity and cohesiveness of the United Kingdom? In the European Union, I think the impact will be felt in terms of it triggering perhaps similar demands from other right-wing parties across the European Union who have been critical of the EU. Whether this translates into proposals for referendums remains to be seen, because the mainstream parties in these countries are still strongly EU-centric.
Yes.
But you've had a referendum in the Netherlands earlier. Now I suppose the effort would be to limit the damage. So the EU is calling for immediate negotiations to start in terms of Article 50
yes.
on Britain's exit. They don't want, because Mr. Cameron has said that this is for his successor. He's not invoking Article 50, but the EU wants to staunch, the bleeding, if you will, and they would like the negotiations to start. It's not that countries have not. I think Greenland left the European Union, but is still a member of the European Common Market.
Yes, indeed.
And Norway is not a member of the European Union, never joined it, but is a member of the European Common Market. So if you look at the best case scenario for the UK, they could choose to remain within the common market if the Europeans accept this, because one view in Europe would be, if you give a very easy deal to the UK, then other countries may be tempted to follow suit. So should we do it? So I'm saying this would possibly be kind of a best case scenario. The other is within the UK, would people want this? Because they would still have to subscribe to the standards of the common market, the regulatory framework of the common market. as Norway has done,
Indeed,
even though
indeed.
it's not a member of the EU. Then, of course, countries around the world would be affected, because take India. There are quite a number of Indian companies who have invested in the UK. We are the third largest foreign source of foreign direct investment in the UK. And our companies obviously benefited from the unfettered access to the European market. If in the process of negotiating the exit, access to the European market becomes more difficult, then it could impact Indian companies. But there is a, there's going to be a lead-in period. It's not going to be.
It's not going to be immediate. Yes.
Because there will be a transition period and the negotiations, which can stretch to almost 2 years.
2 years.
At the end of that, we would know what the situation is. But say a country like Japan also, Japanese companies have again invested in the UK for purposes of the European market. Many of these companies may choose to relocate.
Indeed.
If they find that the conditions of entry or access to the EU become more onerous.
Indeed. So where does this leave David Cameron now, and more importantly, where does it leave his government? Because we've seen Farage already calling for a pro-Brexit government.
Well, I suppose the Conservatives would like to have the Conservative Party lead the government, but it's a party which is deeply divided.
Yes.
You had one section with David Cameron arguing strongly for Remain, and then you had other leaders like Boris Johnson, the former mayor of London, Michael Gove, who was a member of the cabinet, Priti Patel, who was a member of the cabinet, all campaigning for leave. So it's a deeply divided party, it's a deeply divided country. And they would have to try to now, heal these divisions and move forward.
Indeed. And, as far as the far-reaching implications are concerned, how is it going to impact really, say, for instance, in Australia? Because the Australian Prime Minister has said that this decision is not really going to impact Australia as such. So is it going to have far-reaching implications, or is it going to be limited to the EU and the UK?
No, it will have far-reaching implications. In the immediate term, look at our stock market. It's dropped almost, by such a huge amount yesterday. The rupee has fallen. So we have to see what the impact. And India is one of the countries which is still less exposed, because we are not, our external exposure overall is relatively limited. Our macroeconomic fundamentals are strong. We have, good currency reserves. Our balance of payments has been, shrinking. Balance of payments deficit, the negative balance of payments has been shrinking.
Yes.
So inflation has come down dramatically from previous years. So overall, our macroeconomic fundamentals are strong, and our external exposure is limited. So the impact on, say, countries like India will be far less.
Indeed. All right. Ambassador, we'll have to leave to that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, on that note, of course, it's time for a short break now. But on the other side, tensions escalate in the South China Sea as North Korea conducts fresh missile tests. Kim Jong-un warns that missiles can now reach the US in the Pacific. Details on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello and a warm welcome to It's My Life. Tracking the country's Union Aviation Minister. So you have a sweet tooth also?
Yeah, I'm very fond of ice cream.
Anything you want to ask him?
Mira, I will only see you in TV, but we haven't seen you directly actually. That's your
Favorite comic artist?
Oh, I have a lot of Archies. Watch me on It's My Life only on Raj Sabha TV.
Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, the two-day crucial plenary of the Nuclear Suppliers Group ended in Seoul on Friday with no decision on India's application for its membership. Reportedly, at least 10 countries, including China, opposed NSG membership to countries that are non-signatories to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. India is one of them.
India's bid to become a member of the elite nuclear suppliers group has been scuttled for now, with NSG's firm support for the complete implementation of the NPT as the cornerstone of the international non-proliferation regime. The 48-member bloc, however, said it will continue to have discussions on participation of countries which have not yet signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. However, according to reports, India claims the support of at least 38 nations of the 48-member NSG during the discussions.
We understand that despite procedural hurdles persistently raised by one country, a 3-hour-long discussion took place last night on the issue of future participation in the Nuclear Suppliers Group. An overwhelming number of those who took the floor supported India's membership and appraised India's application positively.
China maintained its opposition to India's entry, saying India's membership application cannot be considered because it has not signed the NPT. China was backed by nearly 10 other countries, which effectively torpedoed India's bid, although it had the strong backing of the US, UK and France.
In fact, that one of the 5 criteria set by the NSG. In fact, that the NPT is a must. It's not set by China, but set by the group as a whole.
Disappointed at China's refusal to budge from its position, experts see it as a diplomatic setback for the country. Political parties have demanded for an all-party meet on the issue.
It is a diplomatic setback, meaning that some of the countries where we expected support, it has not been forthcoming. So I think it's also a reality check for India in terms of how India's nuclear status and profile is perceived by certain members of the international community and the nuclear suppliers group in particular.
It is an embarrassment for India to do what was not required. This kind of intense lobbying Prime Minister Modi and his government, we can understand, should have done for the UN Security Council membership.
The anti-India stand taken by China clearly shows that Chinese President Xi Jinping has not responded to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's urging in Tashkent on Thursday. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, tension in the South China Sea escalated after North Korea conducted a new ballistic missile launch. The North launched what appeared to be an intermediate range missile on Wednesday to a high altitude in the direction of Japan before it plunged into the sea. The launch came about 2 hours after a similar test failed and covered 400 kilometers, more than halfway towards the southwest coast of Japan's main island of Honshu. Here's a report.
North Korea appears to have successfully launched a mid-range missile after several recent failures. US and South Korean officials said North Korea conducted 2 tests of its Musudan missiles on Wednesday. The first missile failed shortly after launch and crashed into the Sea of Japan, but the second was able to fly about 400 kilometers before falling into the sea.
The missile flew as high as 1,000 kilometers, which is very high, and reached 400 kilometers in distance. In that, what we think, it has shown some capability with intermediate range ballistic missiles.
The UN Security Council met late on Wednesday in an emergency session to discuss North Korea's latest missile tests, which violate UN resolutions. The United States and Japan called the meeting in consultation with their ally South Korea to deal with what US Ambassador Samantha Power called a pattern of defiance by Pyongyang.
The United States strongly condemns the provocative actions by the North Korean government that is a flagrant violation of their international obligations.
The recent missile launches, as with all others, are a clear violation of the United Nations resolution, and it is unforgivable, and we strongly condemn it.
The UN also condemned North Korea's missile launch and called it a brazen and irresponsible act.
Yet another launch of ballistic missiles by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, in defiance of the unanimous will of the international community, is a brazen and irresponsible act. This is a deliberate and grave violation of its international obligations. The continued pursuit by the DPRK of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles will only undermine its security and fail to improve the lives of its citizens.
Meanwhile, China called for the relevant party to avoid further worsening the situation on the Korean peninsula.
We have noted the relevant report. Our position on this is very clear. At present, the situation on the peninsula remains very complex and severe. We think that the relevant party should avoid doing anything to further worsen tensions to jointly maintain regional peace and stability.
North Korea's missile tests in recent months show the UN sanctions have had not much effect. Pyongyang is still able to get materials and technology for making the weapons. Bureau Report, Rajasabha.
Moving on now, the United States Supreme Court on Thursday dealt President Barack Obama a harsh defeat by blocking his plan to spare millions of illegal immigrants from deportation in a split 4-4 ruling he called frustrating to those aiming to fix America's broken immigration system. The ruling, coming 7 months before Obama's term in office ends, marked the latest success of his Republican adversaries.
The United States top court delivered a split verdict on a plan to prevent 4 million illegal migrants from being deported. The divide comes as a blow to President Barack Obama's 2014 executive action in which he bypassed Congress to protect the immigrants. Obama called the deadlock heartbreaking.
I think it is heartbreaking for the millions of immigrants who made their lives here, who've raised families here, who hope for the opportunity to work, pay taxes, serve in our military, and more fully contribute to this country we all love in an open way.
The US president told reporters that the US immigration system had been broken for 2 decades and the ruling will set it back even further.
For more than 2 decades now, our immigration system, everybody acknowledges, has been broken. And the fact that the Supreme Court wasn't able to issue a decision today doesn't just set the system back even further. It takes us further from the country that we aspire to be.
Obama's 2014 plan was tailored to let roughly 4 million people who have lived in the US since 2010, have no criminal record and have children who are US citizens or lawful permanent residents get into a program that shields them from deportation and supplies work permits.
See what I saw today, it certainly and undeniably breaks my heart. But I will tell you this, it will never break my spirit, nor should it ever break your spirit. And it only strengthens my resolve to fight for fairness, and it only strengthens my resolve and our resolve to fight for comprehensive immigration reform.
The ruling is now likely to further amplify the role the immigration issue will play in the presidential election campaign. Presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump had already called for all illegal immigrants to be deported and pledged a wall between Mexico and the US if he is elected. The case reached the Supreme Court after a lower court struck down Obama's 2014 executive order last year. Bureau Report, Rajasabha TV.
Well, let's now shift focus and bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed this week in our sports segment, Sports Action. The city of Cleveland honored Ohio native LeBron James and the NBA champion Cavaliers on Wednesday. Almost 1 million people, or nearly double the city's actual population, crowded the streets for the parade to celebrate Cleveland's first sports championship title in 52 years. The Cavaliers, powered by James, came back from a 3-1 deficit in the best-of-7 NBA Finals to beat the defending champion Golden State Warriors in a dramatic Game 7 on Sunday. Lionel Messi became Argentina's leading scorer with a superb free kick as they beat hosts the United States 4-0 to reach Sunday's Copa America final. The Barcelona forward surpassed Gabriel Batistuta's 54-goal tally with a 25-yard strike. Messi provided the assist for Ezequiel Lavezzi's opener, then scored his stunner before Napoli's Gonzalo Higuain fired in to make it 3-0. Higuain scored with a tap-in in the 85th minute to complete the rout. Argentina will take on Chile in the summit clash, who beat Colombia 2-0 in the other semi-final. Zlatan Ibrahimovic retired from international football after Sweden were knocked out of the Euro 2016. The 34-year-old announced on Tuesday the tournament would be his last and he would not represent Sweden at the Rio Olympics as previously thought. He scored 62 goals in the 116 games for Sweden but failed to net at this year's Euros. The former Ajax, Barcelona, Juventus and Inter Milan striker has been linked with a move to Manchester United since he left PSG at the end of the season. Golfer Rory McIlroy pulled out of the Olympic Games in Rio because of concerns about the Zika virus. Fijian Vijay Singh and Australia's Mark Leisham have already pulled out of the Games because of the Zika issue. World number 4, McIlroy's decision is a big blow to the sport, which will be making a return to the Olympics after a 112-year absence. A number of top golfing stars, including major winners Adam Scott and Louis Oosthuizen, have already pulled out of the Games for scheduling and family reasons. The All England Lawn Tennis Club Committee announced the seeds for the championships at Wimbledon, which begins on the 27th of June. Three-time champion Novak Djokovic is seeded number 1, 2013 winner Andy Murray is the number 2 seed, and 7-time champion Roger Federer is the number 3 seed. In the women's seedings, 6-time champion Serena Williams is seeded at number 1, Garbine Muguruza is the number 2 seed, followed by Agnieszka Radwanska, Angelique Kerber and Simona Halep. And finally, the 35th Fête de la Musique, an annual one-day music festival that takes place across France, kicked off in Paris on Tuesday amid heightened security for the Euro 2016 soccer tournament. The French tradition to welcome the summer brought musicians of all genres onto the streets of the capital for free concerts. I'm going to leave you with these visuals from Paris. See you again next time.